Jeremy Corbyn doing his bit today to combat cancer, but is Labour's decline after Copeland incurable, and is the man in the white coat to blame?
If we stand together, I'm confident we can turn back the Tory tide and reconnect Labour with our working-class voters and values.
But when does wishful thinking turn into a strategy for winning over the country, not just the party? Good evening. It is just as well that Jeremy Corbyn has a thick skin, and if demands for a new leadership contest are conspicuous by their absence, it may have something to do with the fact that Labour doesn't have the stomach for yet another contest. But are the problems vexing Labour much bigger than one man, and do they precede him? The party is losing both the anti-immigration blue-collar heartland and the pro-EU middle class. That leaves an effective parliamentary opposition of 9 Lib Dems, 1 Ken Clarke and 1 Lord Heseltine. No wonder Theresa May is having an early spring. Also tonight, what will the state of our climate be under President Trump? We have an exclusive interview with the climate change science skeptic, tipped to be Trump's chief scientific advisor.
I'd love to give a closed book quiz to scientists who support, climate alarmism. Let them come up and take a quiz from me and let's see how well they do and how much they actually know. Most of them don't know anything.
It's Oscar night, and one of the documentaries up for a gong documents the deeply moving journey of a refugee mother from Syria to Turkey to Germany and tonight to Hollywood. And finally, the rugby. Italy are currently upsetting England, the unbeaten favourites to hold the Six Nations Championship. At half-time at Twickenham, the Italians hold the surprise lead. So Jeremy Corbyn has told his party faithful it's not the time to run away. But as the recriminations over Labour's Copeland by-election defeat mount up, there are plenty within his own ranks who wish that he'd do just that. And even his own supporters seem reluctant to rally around him. Here's Porrick O'Brien.
It's not called a struggle for nothing. Part of Jeremy Corbyn's message to the Scottish Labour Party in Perth today.
We're campaigning for a just and fair society. If you wouldn't mind, stop putting my back on my shoulder. I'd be ever so grateful. Thank you very much.
And after Labour's disastrous by-election result in Copeland, the monumental scale of the struggle has come into sharp focus.
The result in Copeland was deeply disappointing, and of course, I take my share of responsibility for it. We haven't done enough yet to rebuild trust with the people who've been ripped off and sold out for decades. If we stand together, I'm confident we can turn back the Tory tide and reconnect Labour with our working-class voters and values.
The themes in the conference hall: reconnecting with the working class, forging a compelling narrative around equality and social justice, and repeated calls for party unity. The theme in the one-to-one after the speech was Jeremy Corbyn.
You'll be leader in 2020 without...
I'm carrying on as leader because I'm determined that we will deliver social justice in this country. We will end the misery of people sleeping on our streets and children growing up in disgusting and disgraceful poverty and growing levels of inequality promoted by a Tory government that frankly doesn't care.
Definitely the leader in 2020.
I've given you a very, very clear answer, yes.
Back on the theme of unity, some worrying signs today though. The calling out of some early onset ambivalence from Labour's powerful union base, directed specifically at Len McCluskey, who's standing again for the position of General Secretary of Britain's biggest union and Labour funder Unite.
Dave Prentice has spoken out, but I'd say to you this morning, where's Len McCluskey defending his leader in a difficult time? It shouldn't be just down to me, who represents a different tradition in the Labour Party, defending our leader. If we're going to win this election, we all need to unify, and Jeremy's team need to back him in the good times and bad.
Where's Len may become a question you'll hear again in the coming couple of weeks. We asked McCluskey for an interview today, but he wasn't available for comment. Jeremy Corbyn was also asked the where's Len question.
Len McCluskey is going through a General Secretary election at the present time and presumably is engaged in doing that. I had a very good conversation with Len McCluskey 10 days ago, very good chat with him about lots of things, about economic policy, about industrial policy, about future employment law, and of course our attitude towards Brexit and the crucial need to maintain tariff-free market access to Europe after we leave the European Union.
Other Labour insiders have told us today that Unite remains 100% behind Corbyn's leadership. But after Copeland, the union diagnosis of what went wrong may make or break the patient.
Porrick O'Brien reporting. Well, we're joined now by the political commentator and Corbyn supporter, Aaron Bastani, and Tom Baldwin, who is Ed Miliband's communications director. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Aaron Bastani. I mean, the people around Jeremy Corbyn have blamed a whole variety of things on the defeat in Copeland, but not the man himself. They blamed Tony Blair, fake news, Lord Mandelson, unenthusiastic Labour Party MPs. Even Storm Doris was blamed at one stage. So who are you blaming?
There's a number of factors. I think many are locally specific. Sellafield was huge. Both critics and supporters of Corbyn said it was a big issue on the doorstep. Only a majority of 2,500. Big constituency, so that means the ground game is very difficult. And of course, one of the selling points of Corbyn was better ground game, all these newly enthused members. But fundamentally, I think there's three broader issues around Corbyn, and then there's the issue of UKIP. So I think UKIP, for me, and their stagnation explains Labour success in Stoke and, to some extent, failure in Copeland. I think it's UKIP's switches which have buttressed this new Tory majority of 2,000 in Copeland.
That sounds a little bit technical. Sounds like another kind of excuse, because the one thing that you mentioned, the ground game, the one thing that just about everyone who was involved in the campaign from all parties mentioned is that the two words that they came up against at the doorstep were Jeremy and Corbyn, and not mentioned in a particularly positive
I think, we have to be honest, and I'll be very responsible and very honest, and I'll say a number of problems with Jeremy in the first 3 to 6 months. First impressions count. There was weak leadership at the outset. He's had a tough time from the print media, and the PLP infighting has seen very badly by the electorate. But, this was also a very, very specific constituency. The word nuclear has incredibly negative associations with Jeremy Corbyn, and I can totally understand why a slightly misinformed voter would say, this guy is bad for jobs, he's bad for nuclear energy, I can't vote for him. I don't agree with it.
All right.
But I understand.
Tom Baldwin, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is a problem, but the problems of the Labour Party preceded him, didn't they?
They did, and we've had a very, very long, rocky road back to power. It's a road which becomes rockier and longer, I'm afraid, every day that Jeremy Corbyn remains leader of the Labour Party. It's not... I mean, I used to think that the point of Jeremy Corbyn was that at least you've got someone who's really about principle and conviction. But what we've seen on Europe is not only an act of gross strategic incompetence, it's also an act, I'm afraid, of moral cowardice, because he's given up on what we believe in to become an enabler of Brexit. And don't take my word for it. Patrick O'Flynn, the chief advisor to Paul Nuttall, has been saying today that the Stoke campaign was a great strategic success for UKIP because, to quote, they've intimidated Labour into supporting Brexit.
What's he meant to say? I mean, I don't think an honest word's come out of Patrick O'Flynn's mouth for 25 years. I mean, whatever our views may differ on EU or Brexit or Labour's line, I think had Labour had Owen Smith as leader, had they pursued the line he wanted to pursue last summer about effectively defying Article 50, I think UKIP would have had an extraordinary shot at Stoke. That's been avoided. Let's be honest about the failures in Copeland, but let's also be honest about a relative success in Stoke and the fact that Labour here, I think, have stopped UKIP in their tracks.
But the problem here is that your party is falling between two stools, isn't it? As I mentioned in my introduction, you're not anti-immigrant enough, for the blue-collar heartland in the north, and you're not anti-European enough for posh people in places like Richmond. And there you fall between the cracks. So what are you going to do about it?
I think we do need to have better answers, clearer answers for people who've been left out and left behind in the economy. But to abandon the single market, to abandon Europe, to abandon our principles, which is what Jeremy Corbyn used to be about, in order to chase after lost UKIP votes, means we risk losing a far bigger part of our base. John Curtis's analysis this week is very important. The vast majority of Labour supporters everywhere, including the North and the Midlands, backed Remain. They're the ignored people in Britain today.
Isn't the problem that Jeremy Corbyn doesn't know what his principles are on the fundamental existential question of our time, which is Brexit.
Well, interesting polling actually around low-income Labour voters. Brexit doesn't actually register as the issue of the European Union doesn't register particularly highly. They care more about the economy, low-paid jobs, the NHS, housing. So yes, it matters, but it also seems to matter more the wealthier you are and the closer you are to these large metropolitan areas. Now, he does have a problem because they're going to lose votes to their left, to the Lib Dems. They're going to lose votes to their right, to the Conservatives, not UKIP. But there is a silver lining here, which is we were being told just 3 months ago UKIP could win 10, 20, 30 seats in the next general election. That is just implausible now, I think.
But the Labour Party is trapped with a leader it doesn't want necessarily or require, and the country is trapped with an opposition that can't oppose at a time when you need an opposition.
But why aren't the Lib Dems polling better? I'll ask you that. If Remain is such a big thing, why aren't the Lib Dems polling 20, 25%? Their polling is terrible.
They're taking votes away from the Labour Party, and they're probably taking more votes away from the Labour Party than UKIP are at the moment. But all our attention, all our debate is about how we somehow try and match the Conservative Party position on this. When the wheels come off Brexit, there will be a terrible whirlwind for Theresa May to reap. The Labour Party is in no position to benefit from that at the moment because Jeremy Corbyn has got himself into an awful place on Brexit. It's the wrong place by our principles. It's the wrong place by political strategy. It's doubly wrong.
All right, so we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Tom Baldwin, Aaron Bastani, thank you very much indeed. Now, the terror threat facing Britain is at its worst for a generation. That's according to the country's new terrorism watchdog. Max Hill said the extremist Islamic State group was planning indiscriminate attacks on innocent civilians on a scale not seen since the IRA bombings in the 1970s. He promised to review anti-terror measures to tackle what he called the enormous ongoing risk. The new head of America's Environmental Protection Agency has told conservative activists in Washington that he won't go through with earlier threats to scrap the EPA altogether. Phew. But Scott Pruitt said that the task of rolling back key climate and clean water regulations could start as soon as next week. And he's not the only climate change skeptic with the ear of Donald Trump. Princeton University physicist William Happer, tipped to become the president's science advisor, has some pretty extreme views too, as our science editor Tom Clark has been finding out.
At the annual meeting of America's conservative activists, it was the turn of Scott Pruitt, the new head of the Environmental Protection Agency, to take the stage.
Show of hands, those of you who kind of hope that Administrator Pruitt will just sort of make the EPA go away.
Unless you're a Republican, you might not be in on the joke. Before taking the job, Mr. Pruitt promised to dismantle the agency he now leads due to burdensome regulations on business.
We're going to restore power back to the people. We're going to recognize that regulatory uncertainty and the regulatory state needs to be reined in. We're going to make sure that the states are recognized with the authority they have, and we're going to do the work that's important to advance freedom and liberty for the future.
He promised he won't bypass rulemaking. But key regulations like those protecting America's environment from things like this toxic mining spill on a Colorado river in 2015 are under threat. But Mr. Pruitt is far from the last of Mr. Trump's controversial appointees when it comes to the environment.
Hi there. Jesse Goldman with Greenpeace.
Here's the favourite for White House chief scientist being accosted by a Greenpeace activist.
How much have you personally taken from Peabody?
Sorry, maybe a cigarette.
Personally?
You son of a I haven't taken a dime.
As you can see, he strongly denies personal financial gain from fossil fuel interests, in this case coal giant Peabody Energy. But when we caught up with the distinguished Princeton physicist Bill Happer via Skype, he made no apology for his view that mainstream scientists are wrong to be alarmed about the climate.
Well, many scientists are of the opinion, that they are special. They're the philosopher kings. Everyone should be listening to them. I'd love to give a closed book quiz to scientists who support, climate alarmism. Let them come up and take a quiz from me and let's see how well they do and how much they actually know.
What if there was something that could make plants grow bigger?
And something that can make the whole world greener.
The CO2 Coalition, a lobby group of which he's a director, produced these videos highlighting the benefits of more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
CO2.
CO2 is amazing.
We are living in a CO2 famine now compared to geological history, over most of geological history. More CO2 is clearly a benefit for plants.
CO2.
It's true CO2 makes plants grow, but it's also increasing the temperature of the planet at a rate that's prompted the vast majority of scientists and most politicians to call for immediate action.
For someone who is giving advice to the President of the United States on the overall opinions of science to be so at odds with the global view on this particular area, it's not dissimilar to his chief medical advisor having the view that smoking is absolutely fine.
Like many appointments, the role of chief scientist remains unfilled. But Bill Happer has made the pilgrimage to Trump Tower.
Well, yes, I had the opportunity to speak to Mr. Trump a few weeks ago. I was very encouraged by our brief conversation. He's very much in favor of science, and I think science can look for a strong supporter in the White House.
That may well be true, but given the position of the two men on climate change, it could depend on the kind of science you want to be strongly supported.
Well, he's described the media, that's us, as the enemy of the people. So perhaps no surprise then that Donald Trump says he won't be turning up to the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner, a traditional feature in the political calendar, raising money for college scholarships. Mr. Trump has regularly attended in the past, and every sitting president since 1924 has turned up at least once. He didn't see the funny side at the 2011 dinner, though, when Barack Obama poked fun at his potential non-attendance.
And it is surprising. You've got a room full of reporters, celebrities, cameras, and he says no. Is this dinner too tacky for the Donald? What could he possibly be doing instead? Is he at home eating a Trump steak? Tweeting out insults to Angela Merkel? What's he doing?
Thousands of people have clashed with the riot police in the French city of Nantes ahead of today's visit by the National Front leader Marine Le Pen. 13 police officers were injured as demonstrators hurled petrol bombs and bricks, firing tear gas at the crowds in response. Ms. Le Pen is holding campaign rallies around France in the run-up to the first round of the presidential elections in late April. Sport now and the Six Nations. England took on Italy at Twickenham with a chance to maintain their 100% record and return to the top of the table. Watching the action is our sports reporter, Jordan Jarrett Bryan.
Against the Six Nations favourites, Italy would take all the help they could get. That request seemed to fall on deaf ears. England had to wait longer than they wanted, but drove over the line to score the game's first try.
Within sight of the line, and they've got it over.
But Owen Farrell's kick-in wasn't any better than the Italians. Tommaso Allen got the Italians off the mark as a frustrated England side couldn't get into their rhythm. And then the visitors went one better. This time, the penalty kick miss, working in their favour to score their first try and take a shock lead in at half-time.
And into the second half, the current score is England 17, Italy 10. After the break, from Bombside to Hollywood Hills, we follow Syrian refugee Hala Kamil, whose flight from her war-torn homeland was made into an Oscar-nominated film. The red carpet is unrolled, the golden statues have been polished, and the stars are heading to tonight's Oscar ceremony in Hollywood. And with them, the unlikely figure of Hala Kamil, a Syrian refugee who escaped her war-torn country to find sanctuary in Germany. Her story has been told in the Oscar-nominated documentary Watani, My Homeland, made by one of this programme's regular filmmakers, Marcel Mettelsiefen, along with ITN Productions. Despite fears that she might get trapped by President Trump's temporary travel ban on refugees, Hala did manage to reach Los Angeles. It's that time of the year, and this is the bulkiest and most famous red carpet of them all. The short journey down this river of red, past the paparazzi, to the Dolby Theatre in Hollywood, is a pilgrimage of glamour and recognition that everyone in films dreams of, but only a tiny minority actually achieve. In a few hours from now, Hala Kamil will undertake that short journey on a carpet because of a far more traumatic journey across land, war zones and water that she endured with her family from her homeland in Syria. She and her 4 children had to flee Syria after her husband was captured by Islamic State. Travelling to Turkey through a refugee camp and onto their new home in Germany, their story is told in an Oscar-nominated film, Watani, My Homeland. The filmmaker is Marcel Mettelsiefen. He spent several years with the family.
وقت جد داعش أخذته كان تحت بمقره وسمعت إطلاق النار حاطين له هيك تماشوا عم يضربوه بإجريهن بيضربوه.
The film is a glimpse into the humanity of one family beyond the faceless inhumanity of statistics. This is the moment when Hala's children see the Mediterranean for the first time, full of peril and promise. The family end up in the German town of Goslar. It is a safe but alien world.
أول شيء أول ما جينا الصبح كانت عم تقول أهلا وسهلا فيكم ألمانيا. غريب حكيها يعني هي مبسوطة يمكن مبسوطة.
We followed Hala on her next journey to another strange and unfamiliar land, to Los Angeles, to the Oscars, leaving behind her 3 daughters and son in Germany.
After her father go, she want me every time near. She think that maybe I go and I don't return as her father. I know what she feel.
Before setting off, Hala had to make a few wardrobe choices for the red carpet. She jokes that one outfit in particular would be a rather inappropriate example of what not to wear.
This dress has Daesh. I don't like it.
Hala's journey from the hell of Syria to the safe rootlessness of her German sanctuary to the glare of Hollywood and its strange golden icons is rare and remarkable. But the one journey that is still so far out of reach and that may never happen is the journey back home to Syria and to her husband, immortalized on a screensaver. And Hala's husband has not been seen since his kidnap. He is presumed dead. We'll bring you the latest on the Oscars themselves and, of course, how Hala and Marcel got on tomorrow night at the usual time of 7 o'clock. Until then, that's Channel 4 News. Thank you so much for watching. Have a very good evening. See you tomorrow.